Welcome back, everyone. Salman Rana here, and now we will move on to the next session with Magnet Forensics. Joining me on this call is CEO Adam Belcher, who alongside Mr. Jad Saliba founded Magnet back in 2010 and has since then transformed the company into a leading solutions provider for digital forensics and incident response. Before we start, please ensure your microphone is on mute and your camera is turned off during the session. Please ensure your name appears on screen so we can properly address any questions that you may have. If you have a question, please use the raise a hand feature, or you may submit your questions in the chat. We will get to it as soon as possible. Questions will be moderated by Jordan Simon, who will also be handling any technical issues. That being said, let's now jump into the Q&A. First of all, thanks, Adam, for joining us.
Thanks, Salman.
And my first few questions are gonna focus on the industry trends that we're seeing. So first of all, the continuing vast proliferation of digital data alongside the current geopolitical environment, it's brought cybersecurity and digital forensics at the core of almost every discussion these days. In particular, while costs affiliated with cyber attacks are increasing, we noted that the amounts paid to perpetrators, on the other hand, is becoming relatively inexpensive by the day. So what trends are you seeing, and how is Magnet positioning itself to capitalize on them?
Yeah, no, a great question. Yeah, I think we see a few things happening just generally broadly in the enterprise as it relates to cybersecurity. I think the big one, I think most folks that are listening on this call will have seen things like, ransomware attacks or data breaches from, large enterprises, mid-sized company, government. So there is a lot of rising number of cybercrime happening today with some of those crime types that I mentioned, but there's also insider threats. So these are employees that maybe are trying to exfiltrate and steal intellectual property, or perhaps they're trying to sabotage some kind of system, or they're getting paid to steal confidential information. So both those kind of pure cybercrime, which is the ransomware, the malware, the business email, that's growing exponentially, frankly, as well as insider threats. That's one of the things we see. We see just general organizational transformation. So you think about so many companies that, because of COVID, really now have a distributed workforce. And frankly, I think that's going to continue. But that also has created, in the enterprise context, more risk for, if you're the CIO or the security officer, the fact that now you have a distributed workforce that are using their company-issued laptops and they're using it on their home Wi-Fi, which a lot of times isn't secure. They may have kids or other family members connecting. So that plus, more workloads going to the cloud. You've got this talent shortage in cybersecurity. There's something like 3.5 million unfilled cybersecurity roles. So even the biggest companies are trying to get the people in. And then what we're seeing as well is a lot of these companies, even 3 to 5 years ago, they felt pretty good if they had CrowdStrike or like SentinelOne using their an endpoint security product. But now a lot of them are saying, we actually have to assume that we've been breached. That's the posture we need to think about. And the idea of perimeter security is no longer enough. They have to build the incident response capabilities, the forensic capabilities. And I think things like what's happening in the US, they just passed a law that for critical infrastructure, water, power, things like that, if there's a breach, they have to actually report it to a government agency within 72 hours. And the SEC is also looking at making public companies listed on one of the US stock exchanges, if they have a breach, they have to report it, right? So there's a huge kind of macro thing happening in the enterprise. And then there's actually government policy, that's being layered on it. And, frankly, we've been preparing for these trends that really require that robust incident response capability for a while. And, we introduced a cyber platform a couple of years ago, really to help with investigating cyber crimes and insider threats. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavor of what we're seeing.
Absolutely, that's great color. And you just alluded to this fact in your answer, but government law enforcement agencies in particular, they continue to face an acute shortage of digital forensics professionals. And policing budgets also have come heavily into the spotlight in recent years. Do you believe this is a challenge, or do you believe this is an opportunity instead that further highlights the use case of Magnet's solution suite?
Yeah, I mean, police funding, I've been doing this for about 11 years now. And the funding environment, frankly, starting with the US, but I would say kind of most Western European countries, it's actually never been healthier. Like, there's billions of dollars flowing through the infrastructure bill, as an example, in the US, flowing to state and local governments. And, there's been all this rise in cybercrime. There's been a pretty significant increase in violent crimes. So, if you think even a year and a half ago, where there was a lot of narrative around defunding of the police, that actually is essentially backfired. They're refunding the police of any budget that they took, but they're actually investing more. And the US is another, is a good example where President Biden talked about in his State of the Union address that we need to fund more of the police. So again, there's more money flowing. I think there's a tipping point in policing as it relates to digital evidence, right? So that's what we recover. We recover all those digital footprints that we have using different kinds of applications or the internet on our phones and on our computers, et cetera. But the rise in society's online activity has created this tsunami of data, for police agencies to be able to, how do they collect it, how they process it, how they analyze it, and then ultimately, how do they put the pieces together to solve a crime? And they just can't keep up, right? You think about the volume of data, and then it's further exasperated by a shortage of talent. There's not enough forensic experts. So it's a massive challenge. Government's recognizing this at the state level, the federal level. And it's an opportunity for us because we, as a company, have been investing in modern technologies like automation of some of the workflow. We use AI to help them get through this vast amounts of data, advanced analytics, and the cloud to really enable those police agencies to share the workload, beyond the forensic experts to the broader agency. And, ultimately that saves them time. They become more efficient. They can solve more crime in less time. And so again, for us, it's been a great environment in terms of the funding from government, because it's becoming just a bigger and bigger issue that's impacting more and more people and companies, frankly.
Right. So all in all, it's a great opportunity for Magnet, a great environment to be in. That.
Yeah.
Okay. And when moving on to your products and strategy, so the company itself, Magnet, it's built a stellar reputation over time in the market with its end-to-end DFIR solutions for both the public and private sector clients. And it's no secret, the company has bagged some really impressive industry accolades along the way as well. Is there any gap within the existing portfolio that you see, or a need that you feel is still not being fulfilled and the company is working on? And if so, what does the product roadmap there look like?
Yeah, no, great question. We've invested pretty heavily over the last 3 to 4 years in research and development. And we're actually seeing the fruits of that labor. Really, in 2020, we launched our first enterprise cyber product in Q1 of 2020. So that was a big deal for us, and that product's getting adopted rapidly. We launched some other new products in 2021. So a lot of kind of the investment we made 3 or 4 years ago, we're bringing those products to market. So there's a lot of focus on how do you drive adoption of those new products? How do you keep iterating on them? But I guess maybe to answer your question more specifically, the one area that those products that we started developing 3 or 4 years ago, they weren't addressing is this ability to kind of quickly scan a number of endpoints. And when I say an endpoint, that's basically a computer that's an employee's using in a company, but the ability to scan a bunch of those endpoints quickly, whether it's 10, 20, 50, to see if there's been some kind of compromise, like if something like malware is on the machine or a bad actor, or there's a phishing link that somebody clicked on. So that's been an area that we said, hey, there's an emerging opportunity here with, instead of doing the deep dive forensics, which is what we do today, and you have the endpoint security, like the CrowdStrikes of the world, there's something in between where they don't want to spend all the time doing the deep dive until they really know there's something bad here. But they also, they get all their alerts from their endpoint security, which is overwhelming. They call it alert fatigue. So we're in a beta with a product called Magnet Ignite, and we're actually launching it next week. So that's really to address that compromise assessment market. And we continue to invest in innovation, build out the roadmap, enhance the product offerings. We've also made some recent hires in our organization that will help us actually take a lot of the core IP of what we do today and expand in some adjacent markets. So I'm really excited about some of those folks that have come on board.
Okay, yeah. Seems like some very promising developments coming forward. So yeah, looking forward to all of that. And moving on, so as it regards your new wins, always been curious about this. So how often are those as a result of displacing existing competitors as Nuix, Cellebrite, OpenText? Mm-hmm. And what do you believe, like, what is it exactly that helps Magnet stand out?
Yeah, so I probably would put that in in terms of the wins into a few categories. The first one I would say, replacing legacy solutions like OpenText, like that happens very frequently, and they've essentially lost a lot of their edge in terms of innovation. So we see that a lot every day. Secondly, as I mentioned a bit earlier, like we're creating new categories in our space. So certainly we have products that replace an OpenText, but there's emerging categories and emerging capabilities that our customers want. One of them is just leveraging automation, right? And automation is used in a lot of industries, but had never been brought to the forensic and the incident response market. So we're the first to do that. We're getting great traction, but it's essentially in a world of limited number of talent, a limited number of forensic experts, let's call them. How do you automate some of the workflow, right? How do you automate the processing of the data, the collection of the data? So we've done a lot there. We're leading, lots of growth there. The other piece that, again, we're creating this new category, which is our market has typically been kind of an expert market. Those are the only folks that could deal with digital evidence. But the reality is now about 90% of every investigation, whether it's an enterprise investigation or a law enforcement, have digital evidence, because we're all living in a digital world and we communicate through text messaging and email and WhatsApp and things like that. So we've also built this new platform that allows us to go beyond the experts and get to the masses, right? How do you democratize this idea of digital evidence for people that are non-technical? So we're really unique in the market that, we offer an integrated solution for both technical and non-technical users, and we allow them to bring the data from cloud sources, from computers, from mobile phones, all into a unified view. So then they can start looking at the data, they can do some analysis, which saves, at the end of the day, it saves them a lot of time and really helps them get to the truth or what happened quickly.
Right. Okay, understood. And just moving on a bit specifically into the numbers. Now with with management guiding that following a period of cost curtailment, EBITDA margins are expected to relatively normalize. So what revenue growth and EBITDA margin combination are you guys now targeting? Are you targeting a rule of 50, 40, even 60 for that matter? Is there any target there?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is since the company was started about 10 years ago, like we've always been a rule of 40 plus, right, company. When I look at our guidance to the street for this year, we're between, in terms of the guidance range, we're between a rule of 44 and a rule of 49. And, unit economics and this balanced approach to revenue growth and profits, it's really part of our DNA. We want to grow, and we want to grow fast, but we also want to manage our cash and manage our expenses. And we bootstrapped Magnet for 10 years and reinvested almost all of that money back into growth, enhancing the product roadmap, getting the people on board. And it really wasn't until to the IPO, our IPO last year, where we actually brought in external capital.
Okay, so still plan to remain pretty much in the same band. That's okay, that's pretty solid. And again, pertaining to the numbers and moving more towards the M&A. So with a healthy balance sheet supportive of M&A growth, what does the existing pipeline look like? Is the company more focused on establishing partnerships instead and growing organically by leveraging its product portfolio? Or are you looking at some acquisitive activity going forward as well?
Yeah, I think when we look at growth for us, it comes in a couple of different flavors. And I first point to our organic growth, which last year, as an example, like revenue, we grew revenue by 37%. So that's going well. Second, we look at, to your point around M&A, inorganic growth, and that's typically businesses that we can buy at a lower multiple than our own and that are profitable. And ultimately, they bring usually a combination of both, but unique talent as well as technology to Magnet that we can sell through our existing channel, both our reseller partners as well as our direct sales force. We acquired a company last September called DME Forensics, but a great example of that where they actually have the best team in the world for extracting data from DVRs. Those are digital video recorders. So they're often found in businesses, right? Could be a convenience store, could be a gas station, could be a retailer. And video is a really important, as you can imagine, important piece of digital evidence to understand when you're doing an investigation. And that product, we not only got the talent, but we got the product that we're now selling through our channels. So those are the kinds of things that are exciting to us. I would say our M&A pipeline is really robust. We hired somebody about a year ago to focus on M&A and corporate development, and they've been quite busy. We have quite a few active conversations going now with targets. And that being said, in addition to organic, inorganic, we also look at partnerships. We have a partnership with Microsoft that's fairly new. We recently partnered with a large public safety company called NICE Public Safety. So we're really looking at what other levers do we have, whether it's channel partnerships that we can draft off of and use as leverage to grow our business.
Okay, and regarding the partnerships again, do you still see a long runway for that? You just mentioned, I was going to get to that partnership that you announced with NICE to
Yes.
Further simplify digital forensics for policing agencies. What's the pipeline like over there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a new relationship with them. Like we're working, kind of step one is let's make sure we get the product integration. But usually how we tackle this and how they unfold is you have a common customer or a group of customers that you start with, right? Where you say, okay, let's pick 5 customers. and let's go do some prototyping with, and let's, show success. And then so we're kind of at that phase where we've identified customers to work with them on, to show the joint solution. And then as that progresses, you show success, and then we can really blow it out to more customers. So those seem to work the best, and it creates ownership on both sides to really work together to deliver something the customer sees value in.
Okay, understood. We still have 5 minutes left, so there's an opportunity to get in there around 2, 3 more questions. So this one's about the cyber module that you were talking about, launched in 2020, and we've seen a pretty positive uptake ever since for that module that's aimed towards private enterprises. So in the longer run, are you targeting any specific split between public and private sector clients?
Yeah, we're not. I wouldn't say we have like a target. We are, in terms of that split, we're about 65% public sector, 35% private sector. And our history is, we've sold a lot into public sector. So we don't have a specific goal in terms of the split. Both segments actually are growing quite fast. That being said, I think within, like, say 5 years from now, my sense is the private sector will represent probably 50% of our revenue, somewhere in that neighborhood. So it will get, I think, in more balanced as we get out here in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, it's only more impressive given that again, like, it was only launched back in 2020, so the growth is immense there.
Mm-hmm.
So a few general questions just to round off this fireside chat. In the past, 1 to 2 years, we have been witnessing a talent war, particularly in the tech landscape, with companies willing to pay market competitive or even above that to attract and retain quality employees. Has Magnet been facing the same issue? And if so, how has the company been dealing with that?
Yeah, we are definitely seeing, rising wages, a more competitive labor market than, pre-COVID, pre the pandemic. As you probably know, and others may be aware, but we have a really aggressive hiring plan as a company, with the goal of, for this year, increasing our company about 35%. So growing our headcount by 35. That would take us to a little over 500 people. And we added around, I think, 120 last year. So really aggressive plans, but in this tight labor market, we're trying to mitigate that. And we've used a couple of strategies where we're mitigating it with hiring in other locations. So we have our headquarters here in Waterloo, Ontario. We have an R&D office in Ottawa, but we also now have hubs in Halifax and Calgary, really to complement those teams. So we're looking at what other areas in Canada can we hire that maybe are less competitive. Number one, obviously we're doing a lot of remote hiring, and then looking at other jurisdictions beyond kind of our borders here. But what I would say that gives Magnet a bit of a leg up is many of our candidates that we talk to are really interested in Magnet because of the societal impact we're making. So going beyond their individual contribution, whatever they may be doing, but being part of a mission, right? And being, as being part of Magnet, if they can, through our software, help, policing find a suspect that was abusing a child, for example, or exploiting a child, or human trafficking or terrorism, like, there's a huge why behind what we do, and that really works to our benefit. And frankly, a big reason why people come to join Magnet and why they stay with us, because they're just so bought into the mission. But generally, it's still, even given that, it's still a very competitive market.
Absolutely. And just one last question. So Magnet's flagship user summit, so it's finally returning. I believe in the past few years, you guys were not able to hold that in person. Mm-hmm. So could you give us a sense of the kind of lead generation that has taken place through that event in the past, and what kind of a revenue boost could be expected as a result? Will the company be providing any further details on its growth plans in the event?
Yeah, so the Magnet User Summit is just that. It is it's a user summit where we invite, both existing customers and prospects. They get to meet, product managers and, their sales representatives. So a lot of it's, relationship building, sharing our product plans of, hey, here's what we're working on, socializing new product ideas and prototypes and things like that. So as part of that, we don't really talk about, because generally our end users of our product are less concerned about, like our revenue growth. I mean, obviously they want us to be a sustainable company that continues to deliver, value to them. So we don't talk really about our growth plans, but it's really more about products, new products, how we're enhancing, the current ones. A lot of our users come there to train, they train on our products. But yeah, I mean, it's a great, it's basically the start of our event season, that's kind of kickoff. So what we do see is it really sets us up for building our pipeline for the rest of the year, whether it's, a lot of times it's existing customers buying more or new products. But yeah, from a growth projection, I don't think we kind of factor all that in terms of the guidance we give the street kind of at the beginning of the year.
Okay, but it's still a great asset for lead generation and landing and expanding, right, at the end of the day. Okay, that's great color, Adam. Thanks again for answering all those questions and participating in this fireside chat. Unfortunately, this does conclude our presentation. So I thank everyone in the attendance for attending this fireside chat. So to exit the webinar, you can click the leave button, or you can remain in the room for the next presentation. The next presentation will be our healthcare panel at 12:55 p.m. Again, thanks a lot, Adam, for joining us.
Thanks, Solomon. Thanks, everyone. Good day.